Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Shoot and Stiff Wrestling Podcast, and I'm your host, Tamilian Vinesh Vikram Strong Brave, aka the Indian Nightmare Vinesh. I started audio podcast back in 2020 during the pandemic, and of course, the inspiration came from Stone Cold, Joe Rogan, and I wanted to do something else, something different, something like no one ever done before. And I started this podcast, started talking about independent professional wrestling promotions, independent professional wrestlers, and so many others. I got a chance to do a podcast with Marshall Slamovich, former OVW head trainer, the legendary Rip Rogers, and so many. So those episodes are available on Spotify, Podcast One, and iHeartRadio as well. And this is going to be a YouTube video podcast, and also this will be available on audio platforms as well. And the last Shoot and Stiff Wrestling Podcast, me and my co-host Chris C-Dub, we were part of it. We did it back in 2022, almost 3 years ago. And when we did the video podcast, and it's also available on YouTube, we got a chance to talk to one of the charismatic, talented, independent professional wrestler and promoter of SCW, Jay Garland. We got a chance to talk to Joseph Von Schmidt and many other professional wrestlers, even wrestlers from Alaska, Hawaii. And this time, we'll be going deeper into the world of pro wrestling. And today we have two amazing special guests. And I'm trying my best to put it in a simple and in a nicest way as possible, because these two gentlemen, I know them personally. I got a chance to work with them personally. They're very dedicated, very professional, and they love this business with all their heart. So we have two guests on this podcast, Season 3, Episode 1. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Black Venom, Gernard, and a WWA color commentator, and also the independent professional wrestling journalist for Arizona Wrestling News, Mr. Thomas Bug, on this special episode of Shoot and Stiff Wrestling Podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the amazing Black Venom, Gernard. Brother, good to see you. Good to have you.
Thank you. I appreciate this very much. Thank you so very much.
I know we try to do this, and due to the technical, and trust me, I'm not the smartest Indian when it comes to technology right now. I know my people are, but not me. And we have one more person that we're waiting on. Hopefully we'll be able to see him soon, and I already sent him the link as well. He's none other than Thomas Bug. Shall we welcome Thomas Bug to this podcast?
On this evening.
All right. Thomas, thank you so much for coming to this podcast. I don't know if you ever got a chance to watch, I don't know if you ever got a chance to listen. I've been doing this podcast since 2020, during the pandemic time period. I got a chance to speak to TNA wrestler Marshall Slamovich. I did a podcast with former Ohio Valley Wrestling's a coach, someone who trained Brock Lesnar, Batista, John Cena, Randy Orton, Rip Rogers. We had the promoter, former promoter of SCW, the feature presentation, one of the best independent professional wrestler that I got a chance to step in the ring with, Jay Garland, and so many others. So I wanted to welcome Thomas Bug, one of the best color commentators in the world of independent professional wrestling, along with, again, the magic Mike of pro wrestling, the Black Venom, and Gernard. So welcome, guys. So let's begin with my man, Gernard, right here. I know we did something in the past due to the technical problems. We couldn't really do it. I missed a lot of those footages, a lot of those audios. So let's start with you, brother. When did you start it in the world of pro wrestling and what influenced you to get into the world of pro wrestling?
Oh boy, it really started in 1997. That was when I was first exposed to professional wrestling, at least independent professional wrestling in Tucson, Arizona. And there was an individual by the name of Black Mamba who had an African gimmick, and he had like an African flag. Now, keep in mind, Tucson is more of a conservative kind of Latino white town. So to have the African influence, it was a little different. But the cool thing was, I got to be his flag bearer, and that was the very first job that I ever got in the world of professional wrestling. So it was being his flag bearer, and he is a legend in Phoenix, Arizona, and Arizona professional wrestling altogether. That was 1997. Now, a year later, that's when I would actually debut as Black Venom within the same organization. So it took about a year before I actually took the ropes and came into my own as a professional wrestler. But I owe it
And this,
to to Black Mamba. If it wasn't for him, I don't think I ever would have gotten into it. But it all started with that. But before then, to be honest with you, I didn't care for professional wrestling for a very long time. It wasn't that exposure, but it was the exposure to roller derby actually that got me into sports entertainment. There was a show when I was about third grade called Roller Games. It came on in 1989, 1990, and there was an individual by the name of Harold Jackson, Mr. Mean. And if you look him up, if you Google or YouTube his name, you're going to see some of the most amazing stunts and bumps that this man has taken, because roller derby is really no different than professional wrestling on wheels. So that was my first exposure to the world of sports entertainment, and I wanted to be a roller derby skater. Unfortunately, it went away. There was really no other, way to get into roller derby, but professional wrestling happened to come into town first. And it wasn't until 1994 that I actually became interested in professional wrestling. Just flipping through channels, came across USA Network, and they said the Undertaker was missing. And this was amongst maybe a handful of individuals that I knew about. So it was like him, Andre the Giant. You go to the arcades and you would see maybe WrestleFest, and you would have Hulk Hogan and Jake the Snake Roberts. So these were individuals that you knew. Well, the Undertaker was one of those individuals. And when it said that he was missing, it glued me in. And the very first match that I watched after that was Razor Ramon. And Razor Ramon was much different than the Jake the Snakes, much different than the Hulk Hogans and the Mr. Perfects that I was used to, growing up. I looked at him, and this dude, he was like the epitome of cool to me. And I was like, I was glued from very beginning of the match to the very end. And this guy, he influenced me to like, he kept me strung into professional wrestling. And then the Undertaker versus Undertaker happened at SummerSlam 1994, and I was a fan of professional wrestling ever since.
nice. Well, let's go to Thomas Buck, ladies and gentlemen, one of the charismatic, uh, I would say, independent professional wrestling journalist, reporter, and color commentator. Thomas, welcome to the show, and please tell us your story. Like, when did it's all started for you? When did you start watching pro wrestling?
Oh boy. Well, first of all, good evening, gentlemen. I'm blessed to be here. Um, so, I mean, it was me. It was from knee high for me because, like, um, in my growing up years, I mean, I was like, at first I grew up in Kansas City, and up until like in my teens, and then like I kept getting in trouble, and everything. I kept getting expelled from schools and stuff over here. So like they sent me to Philly, I mean, and that, I mean, in between those two cities is really where like the bug, um, pun intended, you know, really started for me. But like Saturday nights, I mean, TBS, because I was more, I mean, that's when I was a boxing fan first. And so like I kind of used it as sort of some of my ring announcements, like Chuck Long back in the day. Um, and I just remember how I was boxing caught my attention first, and then professional wrestling. And I was looking at the parallels between the two. They both have belts. They both fight in squared rings. And like I said, I was into the NWA first, just because when you follow legitimate sports first, and when you follow legitimate you know fighting first, something like the NWA is gonna grip you a little bit more than no, and no disrespect to WWF and everybody that grew up on it. And to be truth, I did as well, but I leaned a little bit more towards like the more sports oriented ones. As you can see up there, I got a New Japan flag hanging up there. Um, Now I actually got into the business. Um, like it was it was one about the time when I was in the army, like around like '04 was when I started to slow down there, and I had a friend of mine, and hopefully I'll send him the link to this. His name is Savalas Everett. He went by the name of E-Dog. He was also in the army, but he was wrestling in promotions down there in southeast Georgia, um, places like Jessup and Brunswick. And sometimes I would go and see him, and the occasional times that they would come there to where I was stationed at Fort Stewart. That was kind of like inadvertently my leg into it, and then I actually got into the business. I want to say '07, '08. Um, and by that time, I had been in the army. I'd been, you know, it was. I felt like it was too late for me to get to actually start training or anything. I was in my late 20s, and it's a young man's game, as you guys know. Um, and plus, right about that time, this is like late 2000s. I'm all about Ring of Honor and New Japan Pro Wrestling, and I felt like if I couldn't make it in that standard, then I didn't want to try that at all. Plus, I was so beat up in the army, and I felt like I had to do something to get into it. And one night it was March 2008. Um, there was this small company. It doesn't even exist anymore. Down south, hardcore wrestling, and they had been looking for a ring announcer. On the spot, I just said I would do it, and then that night I did my best Bobby Cruz, and next thing I know, it just kind of spiraled from there. Um, that was in Georgia and Florida promotions. Those were the ones. I mean, well, North Florida anyway, like around the state line, Jacksonville, and all that. Those promotions down
Close
there,
to
the
Savannah,
smaller
right?
ones, yeah, close to Savannah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, this shows in Savannah as well. But I mean, down there, that was when I first learned about over the house mic commentary, and that was when I started it. Um, because I would sit there and go to these shows there, and I'm listening to the over the house mic commentary. Uh, I don't know, and I mean, it's just if you're gonna have over the house mic commentary, I mean, it don't have to be like a night at the improv and people are sitting there like, huh? While the wrestlers are, don't do that stuff. And I happened to volunteer one time, and it just took it from there. Um, and then the interviews, I started that here in Tucson, when I was working at the company here, and we were doing the Tucson Comic Con that one year, 2018, um, and it was a doubleheader that we did, and something just struck in me. I was like, you know what, I got to do something to stand out because at that time I'm over here sharing the mic over here with guys like Frank Powers and guys like Willie. Shouts out to those fellas if they're watching this. Hopefully they will. And I just they were just so charismatic and just so outlandish and everything. And here I am, just like the straight up guy who does like straight up wrestling and such. And I had to do something that was gonna stand out or whatever. And then I decided right off the bat I was gonna be an interviewer. And I mean, next thing I know, I sent it out and I put these out on my Facebook page. And next thing you know, I have several people hitting me up, um, requesting to be, to do interviews and such, and in other promotions outside of where I was working at the time. And it was just overwhelming, even to this day when I think about it. And I think about now here in 2025. I'm blessed to have had so many opportunities. I mean, with you, Vikram, I mean, like, I'm over here calling matches with Matt Cross and a bunch of WWE guys, um, and all the stuff in Sonoran and and I mean, I hate to like bring it in that direction, but I mean, you got Garen Ard and I mean, we talk about two African American ring announcers. It's rare in this business, but I mean, we do our thing, you know what I'm saying? So I mean, I'm just blessed by God to be here today.
Man, man, brother, you kind of like make me a little bit emotional there, and it's just always, an honor to have you on in any shows. In fact, like because I don't remember the name of the show. I think it was right after our first show at the Legion. Um, we were just testing the equipments, you and Scott Coffey, and I'm like, he have this Mike Tenay, Tony Schiavone, uh, maybe better than that I don't know the character, the attitude, and I was like, okay, because you had that radio voice, you had that commentary instinct, and you were kind of like a person that we all needed, a storyteller in the audio, in the frame, in the background. Commentators are very important for any sport, any sports entertainment. So we're always blessed to have someone like you, brother. And let's get back to the Black Venom. So you started back in 1998, correct?
98. Yep.
Or
That's
so
Black
when
Venom. That
you,
was Black.
yeah. So when you started, there were companies like WCW, ECW, WWF. It's like one of the like three of the biggest. I mean, I wouldn't call ECW the biggest, but still, and people knew what
Oh, yeah.
ECW was inside the country, but outside the country, when you talk about the entire world, World Championship Wrestling and World Wrestling Federation at that time was a popular, two of the best and biggest companies at that time. So when you got into the business, did you had an expectation, or did you ever wanted to be a part of any of these companies?
Well, I was a big fan of ECW. That was the forbidden brand, that was the underground brand. That was what you weren't supposed to see. That's when you recognize, let's say, the rules that go on in WCW and WWF at that time. Like, let's say, time limits, having a 3 minute or 5 minute or 7 minute match. You didn't hear about that in ECW. So, let's say I started, we were taking after the ECW style of presentation. It was big, it was boisterous, it was extreme, and the characters were over the top. Um, but the cool thing was, I saw people that fit my size, and it was the, let's say, the Dean Malenkos and the Rey Mysterios and Laparcas and such, that I really enjoyed watching. Let's say in WCW and in ECW. But it was more or less, I recognized that I had to be realistic if I'm coming into this business, and recognize that if I, being the size of, let's say, a Dean Malenko, who's about 5'7", maybe 200 pounds at around in that neighborhood, that if I'm going to compete on that level, I better be as good as him. And I was not that good. I was, well, I put it to you like that. He's legendary. I was good. So I had a lot to learn. If I had to be realistic, I'm like, that's just about as far as I'm going to get in this industry. So I had to go the luchador route if I expected to do anything, or let's say the technician route, which is something I encourage anybody who wants to become a professional wrestler. Please learn amateur wrestling first. Understand the how joints and how limbs move. That will help you a great deal, and also learning how to your breathing patterns, because you get into a professional wrestling ring, shoot, you're gonna be blown up super quick. You're gonna lose saliva very quickly. It's a whole different ball of wax. The people on television make it look very easy, and when you're a fan and you're looking at it with those eyes, you think that you can do it too. And it's not until you actually step within those rooms you understand that there's a whole systematic way of thinking here. There's a train of thought that comes with this, and there's also a psychology involved with, let's say, getting the crowd on your side. And those people that can actually unlock those key elements, those are the ones that's going to succeed. Now, when I was first, because I was fortunate enough to become a part of, let's say, the Attitude Era on television. So that's when we saw the Stone Cold Steve Austins come out, and The Rock starting to be big and everything like that. And ECW was taking off, and we saw the Terry Funks and the Ravens and everything. It felt like there was a place for everybody in the ring if you wanted that spot. However, you had to fight hard for those spots. So it was also, once you understand this business, it's a cutthroat business. So me, I'm a nice guy. I don't necessarily have politics, the ring politics. I don't like playing games. So a lot of people, if you're really good at playing games, then, it happens. The backstage politics have buried a lot of good people. Poor promoters have buried a lot of good people. So I had to take a look at who I was first and foremost. And as a black man coming into the business of professional wrestling, I recognized that even within my own promotion here in Tucson, I was kind of put into a certain stereotype. So the gimmick that was chosen for me, had I chosen to accept it, would have been a young thug slash gangster gimmick. I don't fit that. And I couldn't play off of that, let's say, if I was, to do that in the ring. Fortunately, Black Venom was not that character. He was a technician. But the cool thing about Black Venom was he was super smart in the ring. The biggest enemy of Black Venom was himself. And that's when playing, let's say, the heel, which was my favorite character to play. I love being a heel versus a face. I could do both. And if you can do both, you'll go far. But as a heel, it was so much fun because, oh my God, I could basically tear somebody apart, but I also had the psychology enough to know when's the right moment to give them, let's say, the upper hand, so that it's not necessarily me looking like I'm just burying this poor person. Absolutely not. I ended up getting the worst end of it because I became, like I said, my own worst enemy. And through that, they were able to capitalize and capitalize and capitalize, build the crowd, anticipation into it. Because that's another thing too. What I've noticed in today's wrestling, you're seeing a lot more dangerous things. If anybody knows anything about storytelling, and me being a filmmaker, I can tell you this. It's not necessarily watching the action on the screen that's going to make you cringe. It's the anticipation of the action that is supposed to come that's going to make you cringe. For instance, Kane and Mankind, they had this spot, I forgot what it was, but it involved jumper cables and a battery. I think it was going to Kane's groin section or something like that. And just the idea of this, because you knew Mankind would do it, and you knew Kane was like, oh my goodness. The anticipation is what built the storyline. We never saw it. And this is what draws people into your storylines. If you can understand this, it's not just about smashing somebody upside the head with a chair. Any fool can do that. Give me the anticipation behind it. But like I said, growing up in the Attitude Era, that was what I had, available to me. With my size being 5'7", I knew I was not going to make it to a main event status. Let's say if I was going to go to WWF or anything like that. I'm not that type of a hardcore person. So, I mean, I had no business in ECW. I didn't like the high fly. So Mexico wanted me. They actually wanted me. I had an opportunity to wrestle with ENLL, Empresa Nogales Lucha Libre, and that's headed by Sol de Oriente, and he's a legend south of the border. And we became good friends, within this industry. I had an opportunity to wrestle in Mexico. I heard a lot of bad things about it, and I opted not to. And that's one of my regrets. I really wish that Black Venom had an opportunity to wrestle in Mexico. But of course, he would have had to adapt the Lucha Libre style. And everything about Lucha Libre is a little different than it is up here north of the border. For instance, even the lockup is different, you know,
Yeah,
when it
here
comes
everything
to
is left,
Lucha
and there
Libre.
everything is right.
Back, exactly. So doing your arm drags is with one arm, going south to the border, arm drags with the other arm. So it's a little bit of adjustments and having to learn another language and stuff. At that moment, like I said, I was also kind of jilted. I was kind of soured by the industry because of the promoters that I had to deal with, and because of the boys that I had to impress or be around, and like I said, the backstage politics and everything like that, that made me say, hey, you know what, this may not be for me. And it got to the point where I decided to leave altogether because I was tired of the people. And more importantly, I was starting to take on a persona within myself. I was becoming my own gimmick, and I absolutely hated, not being able to differentiate Garanard versus Black Venom. Two different trains of thoughts, and sometimes they would intertwine. And the worst thing that you can do, I was told in this business, is become your own biggest mark. And that's when you start living your character, and that's when you start becoming reckless. And all those stories that you used to hear back in the day with, like, let's say, Dusty Rhodes and was it Dick Murdoch and all the hell that they raised back in the day and all that type of stuff. Whew. I mean, the party situation, the boys are very immature, and they, if you let them, will take you down a road that you cannot recover from. So, I tried to stay away from all that type of stuff. I had every single vice thrown in front of me in the world of professional wrestling, from prostitutes to steroids to cocaine. Everything was thrown in front of my face. I did not partake in a single one of them. And I guarantee, and they tell you that you enter this sport, you're going to be addicted to something, whether it is the fame, whether it's painkillers, you're going to be addicted to something. And it's very true. So I tried to stay away from that at all costs. That was, I think, around maybe 2002. That's when I really said, I'm going to hang this up for the most part. I came back again in 2005, wrestled my boy. We had an excellent match. And then I wrestled a few more times after that. And then I left, I think, altogether, maybe about 2008, because I just had enough. I tried to make a video game at one point as well, and recognized that, this is just, it's tough. I couldn't do it on my own without spending so much money and so much time within this, and I had a life to live. And when you donate your entire life to professional wrestling, which is what a lot of people want you to do, you recognize it's not worth it in the end. That's how I feel. So it wasn't until Jay Garland seeing me on Wheel of Fortune and recognize, hey, I remember him from back in the day. I knew Jay Garland since 2004 or something. And he saw me and he asked me if I wanted an opportunity to be a ring announcer. I thought about it for a minute. I was like, why not? And it was a great decision, because I met a lot of great individuals. You included, Venice, and Thomas Bug as well. So had it not been, for Jay reaching out to me, then none of this would have been happened today. So I owe him a lot of my ring announcing career. That goes to Jay Garland.
So you laced up your boots back in 2008. And Thomas, you started back in 2008. And I want to talk about a different ethnicity, different culture in the world of pro wrestling. Let's just start with the first ever former WCW World Champion, Ron Simmons. And this was an incident that I like just to add it. And I applied for one of those jobs, and I was driving in Georgia last year, and I got a call from this lady. She wanted to talk to me about this job application that I put it out there, and we were talking about the job, and she said, "I read something about your resume that you're a pro wrestler." I'm like, "Yeah." She said, "My dad was a pro wrestler as well." I'm like, "Oh, really? Who was your dad?" "Oh, he used to go by Ron Simmons." I'm like, "Oh shit!" And I was in the highway, and I pulled up right underneath a bridge, and I parked. And I was like, "Say that again." "Yeah, I'm the daughter of Ron Simmons," and I'm like, "Well, you almost put me through in a car crash," but that was just that moment, and I got a chance to talk to her and told her that how much a big fan of Ron that I am, and during all these years, we had wrestlers who represent a different culture, different style. Guys like Ron Simmons, again, being the only one African American pro wrestler at that time. And of course, Teddy Long was there as a manager, and we had Ice Train, but still, as the first ever WCW champion. Then we had Too Cold Scorpio. And again, speaking about someone who had the medium size, someone who wrestled, I would put Too Cold Scorpio a little bit above than Dean Malenko, because we haven't seen style that he introduced to the world of pro wrestling. We never seen it. Lucha Libre was different, of course. New Japan was different, but Too Cold Scorpio, someone in that height, that shape, he brought like a lot of this athleticism in the ring. He
Yes.
could go. He could go.
Yeah.
One of the matches, I want to say, Super Brawl, I think 1994, against Chris Benoit. Amazing match, unbelievable.
Mm.
But then again,
Hmm.
I don't know whatever was the reason Too Cold Scorpio didn't got the push that he deserved. Then let's just take Harlem Heat, Ahmed Johnson in WWF. We can go on and on and on about the culture, the African American culture, the gentleman who came to this business with a different style. Now, we can
Yes.
talk about wrestlers, but when it comes to the announcers, all I could think of, Bad News
Mm.
Brown from Calgary, Alberta, Canada, where his involvement was with Stampede Wrestling. I think he was the first African American commentator who was introduced to on television until we see Jonathan Coachman. So my question
Mm.
is to Thomas. So you wanted to get involved in the business. How important it was for you to represent a culture, an identity, and also what made you to move to Phoenix, and what was the scene at that time, and when you were trying to get involved in the business. I know you run Arizona Wrestling News. So what was the experience like moving to the West Coast from Georgia, and you're just being you want to be an announcer, you want to be a reporter, and how well or bad was that reception?
Okay, so when I was breaking in around like I want to say like oh 07, oh 08, um, and I mean, of course, anytime you break in, a lot of times, I mean, nowadays in the business, I mean, you just need to be somewhere um, like meet somebody in the back of the building when they're setting up the ring or whatnot, and then kind of talk with them, see what they need you to do, set up chairs and tables, whatnot, pop the popcorn, whatever. Um, And I like to sit over here and pretend like I'm this old school guy, but no, I mean that's pretty much how I was, breaking in there. Besides having, like I said, friends of mine that was actually, you know, local wrestlers. Um, I mean, like representing the culture and everything. You talk about Jonathan Coachman. You talk about some of the others. Like I just remember Coachman watching all those episodes of Raw, and like for it was kind of a mixed bag with him. On one hand, you had somebody who had the experience, who had an ESPN background, and who exhibited that a lot of times, and it was respectable. On the other hand, you had Coachman who was in some of these ridiculous angles and whatnot. Um, until I started getting like the entertainment aspect of it, um, I had always wanted to stand away from that and be as polished and as close to the journalists that I grew up watching and listening to. Like, you know, my whole thing was, like I said, I was a boxing fan first. And whenever you go back in time and you see ESPN and you see Al Bernstein bringing his expertise to it, I mean that's kind of like how I wanted to get there, or like even growing up watching football. Um, there's a there's a there's a play-by-play for CBS Sports back in the day that not too many people remember. His name was Jim Hill, and he did a lot of games in the '80s, and he was just he was just really smooth and professional and everything, and had a great um, the core, and that's kind of like what I wanted to bring there. Um, I wound up in Arizona. Now that the reason I wound up with that, I mean, there was just life situations going on at the time. I first moved out here back in like 2014. I was living in southeast Missouri, a town called Perryville, and I'm tell you, um, Garen, you do not want to be in that town. You already know where I'm
I
going with
believe it.
that. Yeah, but I spent about
Mm.
yeah. So yeah, it was just like 3 years there where I actually moved up there because like I was seeing a I was seeing a woman at the time, and we wound up moving back to her hometown, which was up there. And I mean, I didn't have too much of a problem with it because I was actually born in Kansas City, so it's like 4 or 5 hours away if I really needed to go there. But in Perryville, there was just nothing. I mean, now you know what's insulting is that I looked on Facebook the other day. There's this promotion called Midwest Throwback Pro Wrestling that just emerged over there in Perryville, Missouri, and Chester, Illinois. And I'm like, where was this when I was struggling in this town here? I got a friend of mine out here who I'm actually rooming with to this day. Who she offered me to come out here to Tucson, and I look at Tucson and I see, and I mean, I didn't grow up here like Garen did, but I look at Tucson and I see like it's a college sports town. I see it as like the second biggest city um, in Arizona. I mean, 2.5 miles south of Phoenix. If I wanted to get up there, and I mean, I wasn't even driving even back then. So yeah, so like it was just more amenities for me, and like going from that versus being in punk little Perryville, 30,000 people. They know the last time you sneezed, and there's not even like greyhounds or anywhere to where you can get out of town somewhere. Because trust me, when you're a wrestling historian like I am, and you're sitting over there in Perryville, Missouri, and you're smack dab in between St. Louis and like Kentucky and all these wrestling hotbeds, and here you are right in the middle, and you can't even get over there. That was torturous for me. So like, I got out here October 2014. January 2015 was when I was when I went backstage to a show that was going on at the Tangerine Swap Meet. Um, and I met up with a guy who was um, they were doing a show over there, um, and I just happened to speak with them, and that's when I started once again. I didn't even rely. I told them about my background in Florida and Georgia, but I felt like I had to try to like prove myself again. You know, like I'm just a greenhorn again, and that's what I did. And worked my way up from scratch, and eventually I became the um, pretty much the voice. Because unlike up in Phoenix, down in Tucson, we have a lot of shows over here. Here, you know what I'm talking about, where they hit once again. I was doing all solo. Um, and well, I mean, the rest is history. I've been what it's been about 9 or 10 years being over here and still going. Matter of fact, I'm getting ready to do a show this Saturday.
Nice.
Over there at the VFW.
So, when it comes to the world of
Yeah,
pro wrestling, as three of us represent three different things, three different outlook in the world of pro wrestling, and I just want to quickly, like, just want to share something that happened to me. Irvine, Kentucky. Um, that's the town I was in. This is back in, I believe, 2018. I got a chance to
oh
work, and
boy.
of course, back then I used to go by the Indian Nightmare, Venice. And of course, when people see me, they start chanting USA, USA. And it was a
Oh,
foreign
oh,
heel. And the promoter wanted me to go and get a military army style pants from Walmart. And he wanted me to do a Middle Eastern gimmick. And I told him, I'm not going to do it all that. This is my gimmick. This is what I do. This is I'm comfortable with. I was like, okay, no problem. And after my match, I'm just packing my stuff, put in the car, and three men wearing cowboy hats and boots, chewing tobaccos, approached me. They were like, "Hey, you, are you foreigner?" I'm like, "I'm gonna give me." He's like, "Yeah, let me tell you something, boy. This is a green state. We don't like foreign people here. If we see you here again, we're gonna put a hole in your head. You understand?" And I give him a thumbs up. I get in the car, and I drove like 3 hours. I didn't stop anywhere. And again, in Ohio, there was this gentleman. I don't remember his name. He was just harassing me online, social media, on Facebook, sending me pictures of Mustafa Ali. And then I remember he was like, "Oh, we killed your father. We gonna kill you too." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" So yeah, we killed Bin Laden. I'm like, "You dumb fuck. That's a fucking Middle Eastern, and I'm Asian. I'm from Asia. I'm Indian. A totally different continent. Then if you really want to be a tough guy in the internet, how about this? Why don't you show up in Ohio?" And I sent him the flyer, the poster, and he did showed up with the knife. But for him, like someone saw him, and they came to the back of the locker room, and he said, like, "There's someone out there. You have a knife. I don't think this looks good." So the good thing about wrestling, it's a close community where the boys and girls in the back, they support each other no matter whatever it is. So they took care of it. They kind of like grabbed grabbed the snatched the knife from him, throw him out, and again, that was my experience. I mean, this is more there. I mean, but it's not about me. It's about you guys. So going back to Black Venom, you decided, okay, you know what, 2008, this is it. I'm going to be a ring announcer now. Jay Garland reached out to you, and now you're working with SCW. As a ring announcer, have you ever came across any bad experiences in the world of pro wrestling from promoters, wrestlers? I don't want you to name anybody. I mean, if you're not comfortable, but is in any situations where like you saw something that happened to you, or something that happened in front of you, and you felt like you could have done something.
Hmm.
Or in general, any
as
bad
work.
experience?
Okay, okay. Well, let me ask you, going back to your story real quick, because we might have to set a definition on here. The people that were threatening you, would you have said that they were just racists, or would you have said that they were marks?
I, uh, I, I would say an uneducated group of people uh,
Mm,
living under the rock in a country town, and again, it's just one of those things that I heard from others, like they call it sundown town, where
Mhm.
uh,
yeah,
they bur- they still to this day read newspapers. That's old. They have no connection with the outside world. They are in a closed community. So I kind of feel like it's more the uneducation part. Uh, because again, and we were talking about West Virginia, and like he said, Perryville, the Missouri, Kansas. There's a lot of states and cities, not even cities, it's the country towns, country areas where people still to this day give too much of values and importance to certain things. The Confederate
yeah.
flags, bringing the Confederate flags to a wrestling show, and saying the derogatory things. So I kind of feel like it was more like an education. That's what I
Mhm.
feel like it. Yeah.
Okay, okay. Because we do run the risk of having, like, let's say the racists and everything like that to come out. Um, they do happen to take professional wrestling a lot more serious. Like, let's say in those southern areas,
Mhm.
that's always been the case. If you listen to Jim Cornette's podcast, he'll tell you about all that stuff. But the
Even
question, the thing for
Devon
me
Dudley
is
recently
this.
in a podcast, he was talking to Maven in a podcast. I think this podcast came out last week, and Devon was telling him like when he was hired in the WWF, one of the senior people gave him a hard time, and he felt a racial discrimination at the time when he was hired. I mean, a lot of the internet world being pointing fingers at Jim Ross, Jr. And again, I met him in two different occasions. And again, I don't want to claim or blame anyone. I remember first time when I met him back in 2016. He was nice to me, maybe because I was paying $50 to take a picture. I don't know whatever it was. And second time when I got a chance to meet him at AEW Dark Elevation, and again, and the name of this podcast is
Mhm.
Shooting Stiff Wrestling Podcast. So second time when I met him, he was a complete dick. So again, it was just two different occasions, I guess. Again, Chris Jericho, 2016, such a sweetheart, amazing dude. Took a picture with him, and again, 2021, met him in the back in AEW, and I wanted to be respectful, and I didn't want to bother him. But when I got a chance, when he was by himself, no one was talking to him or anything like that, I approached him. I told him like, and I got a chance to meet him 6 years ago, and I took a picture with him, and he didn't care. He just brushed me off and walked away. But again, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, that happens. And it's funny that you mentioned the racism stuff because, like, let's say I was reading a book by Booker T, and he was talking about the racism that he, had to endure with, like, you were talking about Devon Dudley being messed with the higher ups. And it was the same case for Booker T because when he was starting into his, because it was, of course, his brother Lash, or better known as oh, what's his name?
Stevie
Stevie
Ray.
Ray,
Yeah.
that introduced him. Yeah, his name is Lash in the book. So,
Yeah.
but Lash introduced Booker to the world of professional wrestling. They got in, I think it was an Eddie Gilbert promotion, and Eddie Gilbert, Booker T
Global.
credits with actually helping him get a lot of the racism that was going on there because he ended up dealing with a dude named, I don't know if you remember this name or not. He is a WWE Hall of Famer by the name of Ivan Putski, the Polish Hammer.
Mhm.
And this guy, according to Booker T was very racist towards him, and it was Eddie Gilbert that kind of, calmed the situation, calmed the storm for him to allow him to get into these organizations. And there was a certain place where he wrestled in Texas where Confederate flags all over the place, and he ended up doing some sort of move. I think he took a bump, and he ended up doing the spinner Rooney to get out of it. And all those racists were like, well, will you look at that Negro there? Changed their whole perspective about just by one move that they were, impressed with. And it's like, really? That's what it takes? But for some of us that didn't have that, to be that fortunate and have that much talent, for me, like, let's say, for instance, with the storyline that we eventually came to with the MAGA angle, see, this is nothing new to me, because in Tucson, I worked an angle in the promotion that I was working with at the time. This was called Dragon's Den Pro Wrestling in Arizona. And back in 1999, we had our own racist gimmick. And we had a man that came down from Phoenix, Arizona. He went by the name of the Klansman. And when I say the Klansman, he had a hooded mask. He had all the everything, every attribute that you would give to a Ku Klux. He came into our organization and fought our head heel, who now turned into a face. He was a tweener. So you hear the term tweener, like that's basically what Stone Cold Steve Austin was. So before the Klansman showed up, the dude that was my promoter, his name was Ron Sutherland. He goes by the name of El Gringo Loco also, and now I think Ron Von Hess is his name. This fellow, he was basically the racist of the organization. This is my promoter, by the way. Now, he was always cool with me, but it wouldn't take maybe a few more years before I would discover that he himself was a sociopath and a narcissist, someone that you really want to stay away from. I have no problem saying that, because I would tell everybody, look, avoid this man at all costs, okay? Because he loves to skate on the accomplishments of people. He likes to take them under his wing, act like he's the veteran that's going to take you somewhere, and he's going to ride your coattails into that organization and speak himself up and steal your thunder. Eventually try to bury you on top of it. And that was his character. That was his nature. But anyways, what I'm saying is, this guy was the main heel until the Klansman came in. We had a roster that contained maybe about 5 or 6 black wrestlers on there. So I'm thinking the Klansman comes in, storyline would dictate that it's going to be one of these men that's going to take down the Klansman, right? None of them did. The burden actually fell on the other white supremacists to be our hero. So the storyline ended up being cut short, because what ended up happening was we had fans that were coming into our not organization, but coming to our events, that were cheering for the Klansman. And they were starting to get rowdy and everything like that. And this was a bar that was owned by Latinos. And you're getting these neo Nazis showing up and everything like that. And this is a perfect storm for a riot. So we're going to cut this storyline loose. And there was times, because at the time I was a referee. I've done pretty much everything in the business other than promote. So, yeah, I mean, he would play the gimmick with me too. Every time I tried to go down for the 3 count, if he won, raise his hand, get your hands off of me, that type of thing. But I really, to be honest with you, it was quite a storyline. A lot of people did not like that storyline, that were involved in the storyline. I actually came across an individual. I speak about that in one of my documentaries. I talk about this fellow by the name of Skull Crusher Bill, and he worked alongside the Klansman, because the Klansman had a clique. And we're talking about wooden crosses and all that type of stuff. We had another dude by the name of Carpetbagger, wore a trench coat and a hood himself. It was just all this racial type of situations. A lot of those people are like Trump supporters today, so it wasn't too far off from who they really were. But Skull Crusher Bill pulled me aside, back room. Like I said, he's playing a heel gimmick. I'm the referee, and he's telling me that he was so uncomfortable with the storyline and being portrayed as this white supremacist because he said, look at this here, and he points right here to his inner thumb, it's a hand, and it said skinhead right in his hand, and he said this was the biggest mistake that I ever made, and I have to live with this for the rest of my life. There's and I guess being involved in this storyline, he was bearing his soul. Give him a beer, he was the coolest in the world. But it was storylines like that brought the worst out of him. On the other hand, he felt guilty doing it because he was actually there at one point. But like I said, we ended up having to cut that short. So fast forward to what we ended up doing in America Wrestling Warrior Alliance with the MAGA situation. That's full circle. It came around full circle. I was the perfect person for that job because I'd already dealt with this back in 1999. So everything that we were going and playing off of, back and forth with the MAGA, this and all that type of stuff, me and you just in a ring for 9 minutes. I will never forget this. 9 minutes. And we were able to captivate a crowd some were behind you talking to MAGA, some were behind me who were anti-MAGA. And everybody was glued. They were actually into what we say. And we played it off in such a way to where, the intrigue was there, and the build to the next show, that's where Thomas came in. So after that incident where I went off and people were curious as to what happened, how did I get fired now, or quit actually, now I get Thomas Bug interviewing me, and we're talking on the side, and that was one of your, I think, highest rated video, Thomas, if I'm not mistaken.
I got the insights. I know the numbers.
And playing it and playing. And we were raising it just a little higher every single time until that final climax, that crescendo, when you finally lost that title to DJ Brown. And the way that we built that long-term storytelling over months now, everybody got satisfaction in the end. It was properly told. That's how you tell a story, and have the characters involved in this story play off of each other in such a way that the strengths are there. We didn't have a lot of weaknesses shown. It was all strength, and you were either for or you were against. That is the proper way to do a storyline. So the both of you men, you contribute. This is one of the storylines I think the Arizona history should never forget, because this was one of the best storylines ever told in this state. I kid you not.
I remember first time I saw you back in 2021 when I came to Phoenix to work against one of the best in the Indies, Jay Garland, on the Sun Studios. And then, of course, from that moment, I came back to Phoenix numerous times, and we always had fun matches. And again, the idea was to do something else with Jay, with the MAGA title and all that. We had a long-term storytelling plans, but then to keep it interesting, we needed better storylines to just keep that people. It's like, okay, what's going to happen next? And this is, very intense. And that idea kind of really didn't go well as we planned when he got hurt, and he needed some surgeries. And then that's when I found out about your history, and I'm like, okay, let's do something. And I still remember CC Star, after our segment. Yes. We did, he messaged me and said, where in the world he been all these years about your promo? and it was, well, I was so happy to be a part of something like that too. And I haven't really got a chance to get to know CC Star a lot, but still a lot of got an opportunity to pick his brain a little bit when we all got a chance to go to Eddie Guerrero's grave, and we got a chance to talk to CC, and he was sharing his experience. Now, going to Thomas, and Thomas now he's in Arizona. You're doing shows. Was it hard or was it easy to go to these promotions and talk to the promoters and talk to the talents? Now you have over almost like 1K, 2K followers on social media. You're promoting wrestling from Tucson. You're promoting wrestling from Phoenix. How hard it was? I mean, have you ever experienced any hatred or anything where you're passionate about this and you want to give it back to the wrestling world, wrestling community, wrestling fans, and you want to go to these promotions and try your best to put the promotion on the map, put the guys over? Have you ever had any issues and you had to deal with anything? Like any promoter or any talents said, hey, you're not allowed here. You're not welcome here. You shouldn't be doing this. You shouldn't be doing that. Anything like that as a announcer, as a journalist.
I mean, first of all, before I go any further, um, Darren, I really wish I had knew all that stuff about the late '90s and early 2000s. The angle that you went through, I really wish I would have knew that when we were doing our interview because I could have added a little. But it went well. I mean, don't get me wrong, but that was if I'd have known all of that, I probably would have had some sort of context. Maybe added a written editorial or something. But yeah, that's mind blowing.
I'm sorry to cut you off for a
Um,
second about this one moment, brother. I'm so sorry. There's another brother that I had the privilege to do a podcast with. If you guys ever get a chance, please go and watch or listen. Lennox Norris. He shared an experience, something like this, and he was with OVW. He have done a couple of extra work with WWE, and he'd been doing this for over 25 years. And he was telling me when he was working in Kentucky, I believe it was Kentucky, where he was involved something with KKK, and they called him the N word back and forth on TV. They tried to choke him, and something like that. So again, I did that podcast a few years ago, but yeah, yeah. So sorry. Yeah, go ahead, brother.
Ooh, we.
well, I'll let the yeah remind me. I'll let the check that out.
Yeah.
Now when I started doing the platforms for Arizona wrestling interviews, it was like early 2022. I know I wanted to. I'd seen the model floating around. It was something I had always been kind of curious about. And as I'm getting booked in other promotions and such, other than the one that I called home for years, and as I'm starting that up, I mean, I know a lot of people were seeing it starting up around that time, around 2022, and they're like, "Well, what is this Arizona wrestling news? I mean, what is this all about?" I mean, um, and it's now here in 2025 where a lot of people, a lot of promoters and wrestlers, and everybody else in between, now they fully understand, what it was that I've been trying to push, and that's the entire state. Um, and when something like that starts out of nowhere, um, as humans, we have reservations. I mean, if you've been in the wrestling business, I mean, you have your doubts about how things are going to go. You see something brand new come up, and you think it's only going to be a flash in the pan. It's only going to last I mean, especially somebody doing platforms that I do. They think, oh, or whatever, he's not going to be dedicated. I mean, so they didn't take it as seriously at first. And sometimes when I would try to get information, um, they would kind of be a little tight-lipped on it. They thought I would present it in the wrong way, or sometimes I would point out details like I started posting the results and such, and somebody would make little minor things corrections. I mean, nothing really big. The only real incident that I've really run into Um, it is, and it wasn't even something that just like blew up or anything. Slam U and Phoenix Championship Wrestling. Shouts out to them. But I'm trying to look for when I first started the Facebook page. I posted like this still shot of one of the shows and everything. And oh my God, you should have seen the inboxes that I got. How dare this Thomas Plug guy what was he doing taking credit or whatnot? I mean, it, it kind of got blown out of proportion until I was actually talking to one of their head guys, and kind of got understanding. They got their branding and everything. A lot of promotions have um, a certain way that they want things to be branded. Some people don't want certain things to get out because they think it's going to be spoilers or they think it's going to ruin the story or whatnot. And so it's just a matter of maintaining that balance. I've been blessed to the point where I can count maybe like one or two, maybe three people I've ever had like any sort of heat with in the business. Um, and we know, and we I mean, I've talked with both of you all, off screen or whatever. I mean, we know who they are. We ain't gonna say their names or whatever. I'm not gonna sit over here and let like the minority um, detract me from doing my goal, which is to put out Arizona wrestling on these platforms over here. Not when I got so many other people that's supporting it, including the folks I'm talking to now. So I mean, what do we say going on? One monkey don't start no show. You know.
That's true. Here, let me add something to that, Thomas, because I am going to say something, and this goes out to any veteran out there, because you have certain individuals that come into this sport. We were talking, Vanish, about the difference between, let's say, a mark versus a fan. One, uh, and there are a lot of people who they're more or less
That's
marks with
marks with
money who are
money
now
who are now
becoming
becoming
promote.
promote.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Shoot and Stiff Wrestling Podcast, Season 3, Episode 1. We were talking about the experience of these two gentlemen in the world of pro wrestling. We talked about their career, their passion, their love for the sport. How did they start it, and what were their passion about? And again, the Black Venom, how it ended, what was the reason? And then again, we were talking to Thomas, doing shows, being part of pro wrestling from Georgia, then moving to Tucson, and being part of the Arizona wrestling scene, how much it affected and influenced people. And then we were talking about racial discrimination, the hatred, hate game. And I know it's a very controversial subject. Not a lot of people really talked about it. I wanted to bring it to the attention. I wanted to appreciate the legends, the people who actually paved the way for all of us, and so that we all can sit and enjoy this amazing, beautiful world of pro wrestling. And again, right before we went to a break, we were talking about marks in the world of pro wrestling. I will definitely give my opinion at the end after listening to these gentlemen. So, Black Venom, Gernard, brother, go ahead.
Thank you. What I was getting at was we have more individuals nowadays with a lot of money available to them, and they see the pay rates of, let's say, professional wrestlers to show up to their events or whatever it is. So you have them showing up at backyard events. You have them show. You have marks basically with money, and what they're doing is diluting, in my opinion, the quality of professional wrestling, the brand of professional wrestling, because now what you have are marks that think that they know the business, certain traits within this business that are certain laws and rules, unsaid, unspoken, sometimes some of them, but they're changing the way that the young kids are being brought into this business to where now it's like respect is different, the way that you college ring is different. Um, where I wanted to go also was going basically back to, let's say, now that the curtain has basically been pulled away, kayfabe is starting to be a thing of the past, which is
Undertaker have his own
and
podcast.
I'm very upset. Like, goodness gracious. So now you got every Tom, Dick, and dumbass thinking that they can do what we do, you know. One thing is sad, and I'm going to bring this up, and this is directed towards individuals who are veterans. We had a situation. I don't mind bringing this up, and Thomas, I hope you don't mind me bringing this up as well. But because we have a new climate, a new political climate, we have a lot of individuals that feel empowered and emboldened to say a lot of things that they shouldn't be saying, and they will go out of their way to harass folks for not thinking the same way they do. And we had an incident happen within, let's say, Thomas's Facebook, to where an individual who was a promoter ended up trying to harass Thomas Blug over a post because it was politically it was a difference of politics for the most part. And here's the thing, what was said on that post was respectful.
The crazy part is sometimes technology doesn't work. So we were talking about this sensitive information. It's a very important information. They were sharing this important experience, a bad experience that they had to deal with this so-called wrestling promoter. Now, we finally got a chance to fix the error. But you just have to wait for the second episode, and it will be uploaded very soon.